real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to talk about all things firearms, the law, and public safety. For that, I have Frank Grosspietsch on the program. Frank spent over 14 years with the RCMP's National Weapons Enforcement Support Team, or NWEST, and retired in early 2020. He has court-granted expert status in relation to several areas, including the identification, classification, and verification of firearms, ammunition, and firearms-related components in both Canada and the US. He's also an expert in several other topics, which include firearms trafficking, black market value of illicit firearms, and the distribution of criminal firearms. Now he holds several jobs because he can never be busy enough. He's with the United Nations Regional Center for Peace, Disarmament, and Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Frank is also on the UN Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe roster of experts for several topics, and he presents to law enforcement agencies in Great Britain regarding investigative best practices on self-fabricated firearms and components, or ghost guns. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you for having me. This is quite the privilege, and I look forward to the opportunity of chatting.
Thank you, and I'm glad to have you here. It's definitely topical things here when it comes to the firearms and upcoming election. So I wanted to make sure we got a true expert on. I know a lot of people don't like being called that nowadays, but I mean, you are a true expert. People can see all your posts on LinkedIn. It's some really good content. So I recommend people check that out, especially if they want to get educated on the topics. Maybe we'll start just talking a little bit about you and how you got into this world of firearms. So can you just start us at the beginning and just tell us how you kind of grew up into this world?
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. To start off with, my dad always had firearms at home. They were on a rack. They were all locked up. And if we wanted to look at the guns, he'd say, "You want to look at them?" Yeah. Okay. He'd unlock them, take them down, and we'd get to handle them. So there was no mystery. There was no, you can't touch it. It was growing up with a positive, respectful attitude towards firearms. And then start to hunt. And then I ended up in the military in 1984. Went into the military police. With the military police, I went to general duties, special investigation unit, Canadian Airborne Regiment. It was directly with the regiment. Embassy duties, tours around Europe and other places as well. And with my time in the military, I really started getting exposed to different types of firearms.
Okay.
Then I had come back from Kosovo. Then in 2002, joined the RCMP. Was in 2005 involved in an absolutely brutal motorcycle accident where I proved pigs can fly, but we just can't land.
Yeah.
It was an on-duty motorcycle accident. I broke my back. Came back full operational, titanium rods, screws, clamps, an inch shorter than I used to be. God didn't want me, and the devil was afraid I'd take over. And as I was on my gradual return, just before that, I was at a informational session with an individual, a corporal by the name of Sophie Fortier, who was with the RCMP National Weapons Enforcement Support Team. And after her presentation, the two of us chatted, and she found out that I had participated in the program with the cataloging of weaponry in Kosovo.
Okay.
of collection and the articulation, documentation, and then, of course, they did their subsequent destruction. And I had my gradual return to work, and she reached out to me and she said, Frank, would you consider coming on to NWest? She says, I'm retiring. And here's the process you have to go through. Here's what you have to learn. And then I entered into that and subsequently jumped through all the hoops, got brought into NWest, and as a constable, rose through the ranks, work experiences, and I've had a lot of very, very interesting experiences within the National Weapons Enforcement team. And then subsequently was made it to sergeant, ended up being the ops NCO for Western Canada. But I refused to give up. Of course, with that comes the administrative work, but I refused to give up the operational work because there's a lot. And took that and just kept expanding and expanding and expanding because every day, if you're going to go to work, learn something.
Yeah.
But also, the other thing was, and this is the reason why I do the postings, this is why I continue to do what I do. Knowledge is only knowledge if it's shared. And what I go out to do is to make the person or persons that I'm helping or passing on the information to is to make them better than I was so that when they go forward, they can take that information and make that next person or persons better than they were.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people too, they also find maybe they find it hard to convey their knowledge. They don't know how to, but also the platform to use. So LinkedIn has obviously been a platform that you use. I wonder if people maybe that's kind of where they get stumped. So I don't know if it's so much they don't want to share, but maybe they just don't know how to share. No one's ever showed them that or how they can convey those messages, especially in the policing world. We're scared to share everything.
Well, exactly like what we recently, discussed with the AI generated images and youth and guns.
Yeah.
That just can't, Colton Easton from Safer Schools Together, because I do the opinion work for them on videos and postings with youth and firearms about self threat and threats to others. Colton sent me that image, that first image, and without any real background to it, he said, Frank, I need an opinion on this. And I broke it down, just really looked at it and I went, okay, there's some things that just don't quite hit there's some things missing, but I can't say it's not a firearm. And every opinion that I do always has the caveat on it. It is a firearm until proven otherwise by somebody who's trained to do so.
Yeah. Well, and just so listeners know, before we did this podcast, so we were talking about AI generated images and in the world of firearms, in the context of firearms. And now there's these people, a lot of youth putting out pictures where they're holding a firearm and you're trying to look at the inconsistencies. Maybe the skin looks a little different than the skin on the rest of their arm because it generated the hand and the gun in the image. And there's different things in the background that you're looking for. So that's just for context so that people kind of understand like what images we're talking about. So, and Safer Schools Together, yeah, they work on this in the digital threat realm.
Yeah. And I mean, we were originally looked at everything because they're within sextortion, child pornography is really moved into the world of using AI, and they're using the imagery of actual children in creating these very, very disturbing photographs and other things of that nature. And it's being trafficked across the globe. That's bad enough. But now, when we think about issues here in Canada, in the United States, and in Europe, and other where swatting threats are going on at schools, where you imagine you have somebody who has a beef with somebody else, and being youth, not being fully cognizant of the actions, takes the image of the person that they have the beef with and creates the image of them with a gun and saying, on the route to school, that, we're going to take care of that. The threat level just goes through the roof.
Yeah, I think policing is going to get swamped with this stuff.
Oh yeah.
I honestly think it's going to be a very bad future. I don't have a very good outlook on this. I don't see a lot of positives in this realm. I think police are just going to get inundated with AI images, and then we go, well, we have to investigate every single one of them, and we have to treat them all equally, and then I don't have the resources for that.
And
Right? I can't go through every one.
and you saw some of the images. A couple of those images are very, very good.
Yes.
And you go like, hang on here a second. You've got to really take a sober second look at this. And when you think most of the people, they get that image on a phone. When I get it, I mean, I have my laptop, I have a second screen where I can take it, I can zoom in on it, increase it, zoom in on it, look at the details, look at the specifics, look at the surrounding areas, and focus on that and go, okay, something's off here. But these are the markers that I'm looking at. But then we also have to consider we've got airsofts, we've got replica firearms, we've got BB guns that are being converted, we have self fabricated firearms that are out there. We have all these unique things happening so that we have to be cognizant of it all. And at the end of the day, the public safety comes first. And it's been when I put that uh, information out and said, folks, if you want this, DM me directly, because I'm not going to put that document on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's gone Europol. It has gone to UK. It's gone to the States. It's gone to Australia. Your agency has gone to Winnipeg. It's gone to Nova Scotia. If people are going like, hang on here a second.
Hmm.
I want to. And I'm going to be on Saturday. I leave for Anchorage for the Association Firearm Toolmark Examiners for the conference there. I know I'm going to have people tapping me on their shoulder, say, we need to see that. And same, the document's gone out to the Caribbean. This is something that law enforcement need to be aware of. The SLOs that work in the schools, legislative people have to be aware that this is out there. Yes, AI serves a purpose. Yes, it does. It's no different than 3D printing. It serves a legitimate purpose for mankind. And if it's used appropriately. But like we've learned over the years, no matter how good something is, it will be used for nefarious purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what? Speaking of on the education component, just to go back a little bit,
Mhm.
I want to talk about you were at SHOT Show recently,
Yes.
and I think a lot of people just think this is just where gun nuts go and or some backwoods hillbillies just to buy more firepower. But SHOT Show, I mean, they got a lot of different products there. They've got a lot of solutions to problems there. It's there's a whole defense industry built around this stuff. Can you talk a bit about your experience there and maybe talk about the education component? And then I wanted to get into that self fabricating, the 3D printing, all that stuff, because that was a huge component. I saw a recent post you had on that. So, can you talk a bit about the education that goes on there for industry experts and law enforcement? Then we'll get into the self fabricated.
Sure. So SHOT Show it's unique in its structure. You have the top floor where you have new developers coming out and they'll have their products there, what they're promoting. Then you have the main floors where you have the big industry names, Beretta, Colt, a whole gamut. Defense industry have their displays, their representatives showing their product, talking to folks that are looking at or who are interested, whether businesses, other industry, law enforcement. Then on the bottom floor, you have with the, smaller businesses, some foreign companies, a lot of firearms out from out of Turkey.
Yeah.
You have airsofts. you have pellet guns, you have mom and pop outfits. Then you also have certain industries there representing for law enforcement, aids for forensic purposes, but not on the grand scale. Then we have a section that's just law enforcement. This year was unique. They also had a section for archery.
Hmm.
And so then, besides that, there are classes with regard to for the U.S. firearm businesses, the FFL, Federal Firearms Licensees, the rules, regulations, movement of firearms, things of this, importation, exportation document. They cover quite a grand scale. Then you have journalists row, which I tend to try to stay away from because I don't. As you've seen in some of my posts, I make it quite clear I'm not going to discuss U.S. Second Amendment rights when it comes to firearms. I'm not going.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's a never-ending pit to get into.
exactly. Canada, firearms ownership is a highly regulated privilege. The courts have deemed it as such, and it's a done deal. Mind you, I wish some of the regulations were a little better, especially when it comes to organized crime, OMG groups.
Mhm.
But this year was a little different. So, for starters, at the new development up on the top floor, the first place I went to go see was a company called promoting a CNC metal milling machine called the Coast Runner. And I thought, interesting spin on a name for a company for off of a CNC machine everybody knows called the Ghost Gunner
Okay.
by an individual that I don't have a lot of time for by the name of Cody Wilson and his company.
Hmm.
And there I said it, I don't have a lot of time for it. And I'm not pulling that back. And and I'm looking at it, I'm going, yeah, they fancied it up a little bit. They put different uh, images on the outside, made it look like, it's a desktop hobbyist machine, 25,000 US. It's ready to go. It's open source. You can take what you want off the computer, off various sites for building firearms and firearm components. And then so that was one of the things I looked at. And then downstairs at the mom and pop section, as I call it, we're starting to see more the industries that are creating components. But they're doing it out of 3D printing, they're doing it out of sand casting, they're doing it out of milling, all these different forging, and going, there's this increase. And you could tell this unique vibe between industry and the self-fabrication world.
Yeah.
And see this rise in the self-fabrication world.
Do they get along though? Like, so I imagine, if I'm the traditional industry where I make a firearm and I make, my three options, whatever it is, the caliber, lengths of barrel, whatever it might be, and those are your options to buy it from. Now with the self-fabricated world, theoretically, I can just buy a machine, download whatever program, or construct a program myself to make whatever I want. So do the traditional industries, are they not happy with the self-fabricated? Are they looking at that as, well, we have a lot of money, so maybe we should jump into that realm and get ahead of all these smaller ones trying to come up? What's the dynamic there?
That's this is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yes, there's starting to be a little bit of an animosity between the two.
Yeah.
I had been asked by an NGO organization a number of years ago, Frank, do you ever see private fabrication overtaking industry fabricated? And at that time I said, no. I am starting to, in certain realms, have some doubts about my first opinion on that.
Hmm.
And you see that even now within the armed forces. So certain armed forces now take out a sea container with them to their AORs, areas of responsibilities or operational areas. And there's 3D printing units within those units.
Really?
So for guys, where we had our backpacks and we had the belts and you had the buckles and anything that was made out of PLA or polymer, if it broke, now you don't have to wait for, or magazines, forends, shoulder stocks for AR type pattern rifles or other firearms. You don't have to go back to industry to get those items shipped into the country.
Hmm.
You can make them in the sea container.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people outside of the firearms community might not realize much of a gun is made of polymer or plastic, right? The magazines, I very rarely see a metal one anymore. They're all magpul polymer.
Exactly. And the internal components, yes, you have the spring, you have the follower plate, and you have the bottom plate. The bottom plate can be polymer as well. Top plate could be polymer, but generally is metal. Another thing, misconception we have to get out there. A lot of people think we say a 3D printed gun. They think everything in the gun is 3D printed.
Mm.
Yes, there are firearms like that, but they are minimal. Majority is what we would call a hybrid. So it's a mix of the polymer components as well as metal components.
Yeah.
The barrels, let's put it in the context. The pressure bearing components are generally metal.
Yes.
So it's educating, and it's the same educating law enforcement. A lot of, a number of guys and girls who've never seen these things before, never handled, they're like, what is this? We had law enforcement in Great Britain who were trained firearms officers end up with firearm components or firearms and go on, what is this?
Well, and is there any way, are these truly, when we truly untraceable guns, when we talk about ghost guns, which is kind of the flashy political name for them, just like assault weapons?
Yeah. So Ghost Gun is actually an industry driven handle.
Oh, okay.
That's where it came from. It wasn't the government, it wasn't law enforcement. It actually was driven by industry themselves. Well, you think about it, the ghost gunner.
Mm.
That it was industry that drove that.
That's surprising because, especially with all the terminology that they're trying to get away from, where it makes it sound like these are just killing machines. Why would we call it a ghost gun? And kind of drive that. But I guess that's the difference between the traditional firearm creators and you look at these new ones now where they're just making the stuff. I could see how it's a take on the ghost gunner name. So
Exactly. And because the rationale to it when they came out Ghost Gun as a standard firearm has a make, a model, caliber, a serial number for the most part. If we think back, going way back when we were younger, the Sears Roebuck, those 22 firearms didn't have serial numbers on them. But for the most part, you got a make, model, caliber, serial number, and if it was made in another country and brought in the United States and then subsequently sold into Canada, an importer stamp.
okay.
If you're in the firearm is made in Europe, you'll have your serial number on the lower receiver, on the slide, and on the barrel, so that everything matched up. When you take all that away, that's when they would say a ghost gunner. Can you trace it? You can trace the fire. You can't trace the firearm per se, but you can trace if a round is discharged by the markings that are left either on the recovered bullet or on the casing head stamp. So the extractor mark, the mark that's on the primer, the markings that are left on the breech face when when the cartridge, for example, slams back against the breech face, you'll have machining marks
Yeah.
that'll be left on that.
And this is like some very, very cool technology that they have. And for anyone who isn't in the law enforcement community, they might not know this. Like even just firearms community might not know this, but they, it's looking at things like under a microscope for these very specific markings that are left by all the metal components, and I
Exactly.
don't know like if 3D does this, but all the metal components slamming and prying and pulling together, right? Everything always leaves a little mark behind. So,
Exactly, and like when I was in Madrid last year at a conference for 3D printing for, Impact out of Spain and Europol, there was a presentation given about a 3D printer and the marks being left on a Glock that was printed on a 3D printer on the plate. And they said, "Yes, you can match the plate, the firearm to the markings that are on the plate." And then I said, "Yeah, but you have to remember one thing, individuals within the self-fabrication world, and if especially if they're on the illegal side of the house, will put green painter's tape on the table as they're printing
mm,
so that no marks are left.
yeah.
So you can't do a match." And even that particular forensic individual was like, "What?" So it's like when I was brought into AFTE, the Association of Firearms and Tool Mark Examiners, it was to bridge a gap between forensics and law enforcement so that I really went out to learn from some incredible mentors. Ron Nichols, Peter Gagliardi out of the United States. I mean, these guys are just geniuses when it comes to this world. And went, teach me about the forensics, what needs to be done, what needs to be asked for, what's looked at. And then taking that information and taking it to the law enforcement side and going to the girls and guys and going, look, this is what you need to look for.
Hmm.
This is what you need to ask for so that everybody comes to the table together. And if you're dealing with self-fabricated file, bring somebody from the forensics world to the table. The forensic person cannot be involved in the investigation per se because we have to prevent bias. But the law enforcement can directly ask the forensic folks, what do we need? What do we need to do? How do we do it? How do we seize it? How do we package it? And it's not just the firearm components or, if they're self-fabricating ammunition or whatever the case may be. But then you also need the IT people. What do I seize? How do I seize preservation orders, production orders? What do I need to look for? How do I extract it? All these unique dynamics. But then we also have to remember within the self fabrication world, they also put out information how to remove all that information from your computers. They
Yeah.
tell you not to put anything on your cell phone, just to hide it. And it's my task is to pass that information on to both sides
Hmm.
to go, this is what you need to be aware of. This is what you need to look for. And this is how you go about looking for it.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask. Like when you talk about, say, the drug world, and you get a kilo pressed, and it sometimes people put their own stamp on it, so people know this is this person's product. It's good quality, and you can trust it, or whatever they're trying to sell you. Do you see that in the firearm side of things when people are doing these 3D? So even though it's illegal, they still want the customers to come back to them. So how are they getting the word out that, hey, you should buy from me, whatever, whatever my name is, you should buy from me and my products are trustworthy? Are they just going to solely rely on word of mouth because they don't want to put any identifying markings on these firearms?
Exactly. But we have had individuals put their unique marks on these things.
Okay.
Not very many, but that is a vanity thing. But it's let's look at it. We look at some criminals if they put their skill sets in their criminal enterprise into private business, they would have done really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
But it's stupidity. I mean, for me, I looked at some of the folks that I've managed, worked on teams with, and to get people put in jail. And where they screwed up on was the gun. They ran a great drug enterprise. They did, whatever criminal enterprise they were involved in, they were great. But when it involved guns, and especially guns and guys, I'm sorry, but you're mixing two levels of stupidity
Hmm.
that just come together and it screws them up.
So with the ghost guns and the 3D printed world, they're not truly untraceable because they can leave some marks. Some people do put some identifying markings on them. So it's right now it's kind of like a hit or miss world, I guess you call it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I think and I mean technology is always our friend. We needed to get better and better on this side of things, and I imagine that'll change over time. We'll find new ways to figure out where exactly a round was fired from and trace these guns that were previously untraceable. Kind of like DNA, right? Nobody knew how to use DNA, and now all of a sudden got all these tools and we're solving crimes from 30, 40 years ago. Unfortunately, it takes that long to
Yeah.
get the new technology. Are there any other trends you're seeing that are kind of an issue for law enforcement? Or is it just this whole 3D printed thing is kind of the big thing right now?
Yeah. So within that world, it's really interesting. Things are coming very, very fast and furious. So, of course, what set the standard within the 3D world, the 3D fabrication, polymer fabrication, and I say polymer fabrication, was the FGC 9. So the fuck gun control 9 millimeter, or there was also the FGC 22. And I mean, it's been being used in Myanmar, in the conflict there. It's being used. We recently had a file in Sweden where there was an attempt robbery. The individual had a FGC 9. It was very visible on the video. Was misidentified by the press, but it's an FGC 9. We are getting FGC 9s printed in illegally for criminal purposes in Canada, in the Caribbean. We had a file late last year in Trinidad. Uh, a gentleman was fabricating 3D printing firearm components and assembling the firearms for criminal enterprise in Trinidad. That's also supplementing the firearms that are being imported illegally from the United States, as well as we've got guns coming into the Caribbean from Latin America. We've got we just had a big file in France, uh, Project Winter, which was in January. They went into the scene. This gentleman was known for trafficking in counterfeit documents, counterfeit clothing. And when they walked in, it was a full scale fabrication site. And he was building FGC 9s as well as other firearms. But I
Wow.
mean, it was full scale. It was 3, 4 machine printers going. He was doing ECM, what's known as electrical chemical machining, the barrels where you rifle the barrels.
Okay.
Um, it was nuts. Nobody expected that when they walked in. We had the Ecuador went a little crazy. We had the prison riots, especially in the prison known as El Rodeo, and you had two FGC 9s in criminal hands in the prison, as well as other weapons.
This world is crazy.
Exactly. So, and the thing with the FGC 9 is you can self-fabricate all the components. It can be an entirely self-fabricated gun. The 3D printing and components from a hardware store.
Okay. These are still metal barrel, metal firing pin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Then we have some developments coming out. The Uratao out of Brazil. We have the Partisan 9. We have a number of firearms that are now coming directly built on the backbone of the FGC 9, but can be entirely self-fabricated. So customs, law enforcement have nothing's being imported into the country.
Sorry, nothing's being imported as in like whole guns or just
Or
components?
firearm components.
Okay.
So the individual who's fabricating can fabricate all the components in-house.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that move. And then we're not that far away from 3D printing metal sintering for a desktop unit. Right now, that is excessively expensive, but so was 3D polymer printing at one point.
Hmm.
So we're going to have the sintering. So you're going to have a desktop unit where you're able to use the metal powder and create the firearms components out of metal,
Really?
which will be stronger, needless to say.
Yeah.
Then we also now have a new unit that is out where it will cut metal plating, where you can take your 3D printer, add this aftermarket component, and you can actually cut metal. So you can cut the triggers, you can cut and then do the shaping as you want. But you can actually start creating these firearm components with this unit.
Well, maybe that kind of leads into one of the next things I was going to talk about was around legislation and just implementing all these laws. This is something I kind of been thinking on a lot lately when with prior guests I've had. So I've had people on from ATF, DEA. One of the things I bring up or try to remember to bring up is, what is their view when they look back on their career and when it comes to chasing commodities, you're chasing like the one item. I chase the drugs, I chase the firearms. At the end of the day, I'll say the people are the problem. What when we're implementing legislation, it's like, well, you can only have this length of barrel, and you can't bring in switches to make your guns fully automatic, we're talking about like components that are super tiny in some respects.
Yep.
Are we doing ourselves any favors by implementing all these laws? Like, and the laws are way behind the times, oftentimes, and the people talking about it at those higher up levels, at the federal government level, you can tell they don't know very much about firearms. So just it's like a whole world of madness. And is it the laws? Like, is that's what's going to save us from death and destruction on the streets? Because from my perspective, being in a gang unit, the firearms that are coming in, most of them that we see here in Edmonton are not straw purchased, not fabricated yet, although those have started to show up. But a lot of it's just US. They're coming over the border,
Yep.
and we're getting these prohib guns with 3.5 inch barrels, extended magazines, like stuff you can't buy here. So are the laws really protecting us? So I just kind of want to get your take on
Okay.
the legislative side of things.
So let's go to the simplest form to start off with, the high capacity magazines. So when the ARs were still, you could have access to the AR mags, the Glocks, the 31 round mags. They were imported into Canada, and all they would put in was a rivet to prevent either 5 or 10 rounds, which was a comedic at best. And especially when you consider that in California had already initiated where the magazines had to be limited in their capacity. Or you could go to a business and say, okay, if you want to import those magazines into Canada, it can only take 5 or 10 rounds, period.
Just for context, some people, the magazines that you get in California, the California compliant, as they're kind of called on some of the websites, the magazine is literally like half of it is just a plastic mold on the bottom. The top half is where you can put your ammunition. So it physically can only hold X amount of rounds. Whereas if you have a normal magazine, they'll ship it into Canada and they put a pin in. But a lot of people just take a drill the pin out. Now you have a
Yeah.
extended magazine or more capacity.
So case in point here, I'm just showing Nathan the California compliant.
Yes.
I have one here. Was given to me at SHOT Show, and it's made by a company called CompMag, but it's made specifically, and there's no reason why something like this couldn't. And there's no way to convert this to a 30 round mag.
Mm-hmm.
It may look pretty tickety boo, but it can't be converted. So you go, okay. So these products are out there, and we're going like, why are these being allowed into Canada? It's like, come on, deal with this. So then, okay, so let's go back pre-COVID. So with yourself out in, I call the prairies, we let's look at the sourcing of a number of firearms. Cooeys, Mossbergs, the 22s, barrels cut, stocks cut
Yeah.
down. If we're, shotguns, items that have been stolen, especially up at, with the further north we go, with organized crime, whether in First Nations or other particular groups, the ready access to firearms, right? Then COVID came. Nobody could really go across the border. So that started to change. And then, of course, we had straw purchasing
Yeah.
that time. Then COVID came. Straw purchasing went through the roof during COVID because people couldn't go to the States to get the guns,
Hmm.
gun shows and things of that nature, because they have what we refer to as the gun show loophole. Then post COVID, people could start going back down to the States again. And guns are a huge commodity. If I can buy a handgun, so let's put it this way, when I really kicked off with NWest, I could buy a handgun at a gun show in Washington State or at a garage sale, pay 400, 500 US. On the black market at that time in Canada, I could get 2,500 for it.
Okay.
Now that's up to 5 and 6 for a handgun,
Yeah.
as you well know. And then if we're talking about an AR type rifle, we're going significantly higher. But then again, that also comes down to it's dependent on the criminal that we're dealing with. What kind of money do they have available?
Yes.
So the dynamics across Canada are significantly different. You think on the West Coast, when I started into the world of the self-fabrication world, it wasn't 3D printed guns. It was CNC fabricated 1911s, ARs, Tech 9s, the Max from plates.
Hmm.
Those were CNC fabricated because our criminals out on the West had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the guns, it was also high quality suppressors fabricated on CNC machines. It was amazing. We had an individual that went down to the US, the Sig Sauer P250, which is a modular drop-in trigger group that goes into the grip.
Okay.
That needs to be serialized. Well, he'd gone down, bought a significant number of them. Little did he know that the person he was buying for was an agent for the ATF, and we were videotaping, audio taping what was going on. The person bought the unit, the firearms, but he never took delivery of the serialized component. So he never triggered off the ATF multiple purchase alert.
I see.
So then he was an engineer. So he took all the measurements, sent them up to Montreal, then from Montreal to Vancouver. And on his industry CNC machine, started building the serialized components. And needless to say, then we had homicide after homicide after homicide where the guns were used and dropped on scene because nobody knew where the hell they were coming from.
Crazy. Well, and how is legislation supposed to help in that scenario?
It
Right.
doesn't.
So,
And so then we look at the legislative side. So let's for example, so Jamaica has changed their laws. Some other countries have tried, but let's look at 102.1 of the criminal code, which is recent. Every person commits an offense who possesses or accesses computer data that pertain to a firearm other than a firearm that is deemed under subsection 84.3 not to be a firearm, or a prohibited device that is capable of being used with a 3D printer, metal melting machine, or similar computer system for the purpose of manufacturing or trafficking a firearm or prohibited device derived from that computer data unless authorized under the Firearms Act. But then we also have part 2 of that, the distribution of computer data. Every person commits an offense who distributes, publishes, or makes available computer data that pertains to a firearm other than a firearm under the 84.3 or a device that's capable of being used again with 3D printer, metal milling, or simpler that are intended to be used for the purpose of manufacturing. So that's one of the better, but certain parts of this uh, also included this was the regulation with regard to the non-regulated firearm components, principally the barrel,
Okay.
which is the pressure-bearing component. The order in council still hasn't gone through. So therefore, I can print to my heart's content if I have, but I have ready access to the barrel because it's not yet controlled.
Yeah. Well, and is that not one of the discussions that they're having around, was it magazines? And then even just like some of the other components? I thought they were looking at like uh, tracking magazines somehow or purchases of them or certain components.
Tracking magazines is nigh impossible.
Hmm.
Um, Put it in the concept. I'm the one responsible. I was the expert for a file called Regina versus Kankade that is now used across Canada by the CBSA and law enforcement, where firearm components, regulated components that are coming into Canada, you can be held accountable, especially if they're prohibited items. So Mr. Kankade was bringing in 30-round mags for AR, but just the body, not the bottom plate, not the spring, and not the follower plate.
Oh, really?
And he said, well, it's legal. Well, I went and did my homework and went, well, here's the thing. The criminal code, you have to know how to read the criminal code and understand what it says, was that component, but it never said it had to be a complete component. And this is how I provided it to the court. And I went, Your Worship, the Supreme Court judge, and I went, have you ever walked on the beach and picked up a shell, a large shell? And, or at some point, taken the shell, put it to your ear and listen to the ocean. You
Hmm.
know how we were as kids, right?
Yeah.
And the judge went, yes. And I went, even though there's no living entity in the shell, is it still a shell? And the judge looked at me and went, I got it.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Kankade took it to the Supreme Court to challenge it on the French language version of that. Only problem is I'm multilingual. He lost. But Regina versus Kankade set the tone for the firearms components coming into Canada. And then let's go back to polymer 80 kits. So, which are what they call the 80% kits. That's an industry term. So you have the grip, the lower receiver of an AR or a Glock these were the ones who drove the market. It came with a jig, it came with the drills, it came with and you drilled out and then you put in the rail and you put the lock block in and everything else. And then you had access where you could buy, because it's non-regulated, the slide, the barrel, the trigger group, and you had a gun. Again, no make, no model, no serial number, but you had a functioning firearm. And I took it, I thought, well, I was dealing with the 1911s and the homicides back to back to back to back. And I had enough. So I had reached out to probably one of the best firearms grounds in Canada by the name of Vincent Paris, who's based in Toronto. And Vincent and I, we've known each other for years. And I went, Vince, I want to deal with this. And this is what I'm thinking of how to go about doing this. And he went, it's doable. And he said, I will put you together case law for your articulation as you go forward. And then I went to a lab, firearms forensic lab, said, this is what I want to do. When I get these kits, I want to send the kits to you. But what I want a brand new forensic technologist who has no machining skill to go onto YouTube and use the tutorials on YouTube
Yeah.
to build the guns.
So you're showing anybody can do this.
Yes, exactly. So the case law is Regina versus Hasselwander in Canada. So we had a Scorpion V61, I had a 1911, and I had an AR. Sent them off. The individual built them.
Yeah.
Scorpion is automatic. The AR is automatic in the first instance without even any machining. And unfortunately, I can't share it on how we do that here.
Yeah.
That is what changed and then the AR kits got banned in Canada because of that. The Scorpion kits got banned in Canada because of that. And that is what ended up creating the regulations with regard to the Glock kits that were still legal to come in at that time, that they had to be serialized in the United States before entry into Canada. The importer, the business, had to register those because they were guns. And then a person had to have an appropriate restricted PAL, appropriate class PAL, to be able to buy the kit, and that kit was registered to their name.
Okay.
So that's how that came. That's how I got pulled into this world. And here was the thing. I actually had one of my associates within NWest who actually said, Frank, why are you doing this? You're never going to pull this off. Well, lo and behold,
Yeah.
if you know the law and you know how to articulate, you can. But you have to work with a great team, seek the resources that will support you, know what you need to do, know what you need to ask, and you can pull it off.
Yeah.
Legal.
So what I'm kind of gathering though is so legislation is one part of the solution.
Yes.
And there's certain instances where, yes, it's useful and it helps, but it's not the end all be all. Wanted to get your opinion, just as we're coming up to the end of the time here, about 10 minutes or so left.
Okay.
I wanted to get your opinion on this Bill C-21 and kind of what the intended outcome is of it. And do you have any maybe insider insight into how they're actually going to pull this off, if they are going to pull it off?
Okay. So let's take it back. I know the individual who put the list together.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a conversation between himself and I in front of a group of other NWest individuals. And let's take one particular firearm in question. It's the Mossberg 702 Plinkster, the semi-automatic 22 non-restricted rifle. And he came out and he prohibited the Mossberg 702 Plinkster Tactical.
So like a specific version of it.
It's just a version of it. But the only thing that changes, absolutely nothing changed with the mechanics of the firearm, but the furniture. So Mossberg had put on AR style furniture.
Yeah.
Nothing else changed with the gun. It's a 22, but nothing else changed.
Well, this is some of the jokes that go or memes that go around about this stuff, right? It's like pistol grip, scary. Straight wood stock grip, not scary. It's like, but it does the same thing, right?
So I went to him and I said, okay, I got a question for you. The firearm, the Plinkster, is the pig. The Plinkster Tactical is the same pig, but with lipstick on it.
Yes.
The only rationale that person had for articulating that as a prohibited firearm was the furniture. It had nothing to do with criminality. I had a file with a high caliber hunting rifle, single shot. That rifle got prohibited because of a file I worked for unsafe storage. That list is biased.
Yeah.
Let me give you the SKS rifle. I was sat down in a room with 3 files. I was in Ottawa for training. And I was asked by that same person who made that decision with the Mossberg. Well, I want you to look at these 3 lists, and it was the proposed gun bans. One was total gun ban. One was another variant. And then we had the one that has been put out now. And on it, the AR was the top of the list. And I asked, where's the SKS rifle? The SKS rifle has been used in the majority,
Yeah.
not for Heidi, may she rest in peace, of the killing of police officers in Canada after Mayor Thorpe and other individuals.
I was gonna say it's mostly handguns are using a lot of the shootings. We're not seeing ARs, and handguns has just been a freeze. I always thought, like, if the government really cared, if the feds really say, they go around and say we're against all these all the violence and we don't believe in firearms, then just ban firearms wholly and completely, or at least the importation of it or whatever. But when you try to do like the patchwork idea,
That's important.
it doesn't work. And I just thought, like, even the banning of certain aspects, it's like, well, then we're like arguing over millimeters of things, or how certain things look. It just seems insane.
It is. Somebody said, Frank, if you were to do this, how would you do this? I said, you start at the simplest form. So even when I was shown those 3 documents, I said, one of the things I said, let's make some suggestions here. Regulate the size of magazines that can actually come into the country, not modified with rivets, but actually the magazines need to be this. And then said, all right, make all magazines 10 rounds, all magazines.
Mhm.
So that, of course, you can't do that with tubular fed, lever action rifles, things of that nature. But that way, IPSC shooters, Olympic shooters, competitive shooters, everybody's on the same page. And you can't be the worst and it can't be the best, but let's find a common sense median. Then I said, gun safes, storage. Let's make a proper definition of what is actually a gun safe in Canada.
Yes.
And the pro-gun advocacy likes to talk about Switzerland, about, the access to guns and everything else. Well, but they also don't know in Switzerland, police don't need a warrant to come into your house to check the gun safe. And it's a proper gun safe. It's not a locker. It's a gun safe that's affixed to the frame or the foundation of the house. So on.
And this goes on to like a lot of the argument around just rights in general. Everybody likes to quote the one sentence that fits their narrative, but it's like, well, you forgot all the subsections and ands and buts and ors that are in there. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then let's make the gun safes tax-free.
Mm.
Let's make them tax-free. It serves a better purpose. Then let's look at which firearms are actually committing the crimes. Yes, there's a number of handguns, things of that nature, but let's be a little bit more specific on how we address this. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to ban all this, the individuals that are illegally using the gun, apply the law.
Yes.
Don't reduce the sentencing. Actually apply the law. Let's deal with this appropriately, where they have to do their time. I cannot understand somebody using a gun in a crime and being allowed to go out on bail. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
They took the life of an innocent, or maybe sometimes not an innocent individual, but they still took the life of an individual. They don't have that privilege. They don't have that right. That is, take it away. Let's use common sense on this. I was talking about the SKS rifle and people talking about the buyback and everything else. I'm going, okay, so the SKS and the rationale I was told was the SKS is not going to be banned because First Nations, it's affordable and for hunting. So you know what? Why don't we government go out, buy a good quality bolt action rifle in a caliber that's appropriate for hunting moose and elk and caribou? Do a trade.
Mm-hmm.
Give us the SKS. We're going to give you this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just see as soon as the politics become involved, it's never genuine. It always seems to be disingenuous. And the conversations, don't really come across as finding common ground. It's just everything now is so divisive, right? We're just kind of at the end of our time. I wanted to make sure I get the chance to just give you a second to say, do you have any upcoming projects, any big things you're working on? I know you said you're going up to Anchorage for one of the events up there. Any other stuff kind of happening in your world?
Yeah, so I'm giving a workshop at the Association Fire and Tool Mark Examiners in Anchorage, which is, again, it's on self-fabrication, but it's directed to both law enforcement and forensic. It's best practices and challenges. And I'll be co-presenting with one of the technicians from the Forensic Firearms Lab out of Quebec. So, and it's a huge turnout. So we're looking forward to that. Then the end of June, I am in Trinidad on helping presenting with the firearms trafficking course there. And then in July, I am in Belize
Wow.
to present providing excuse me, providing a shooting incident reconstruction course. And then whatever else comes down the pipe.
Awesome. Wow. Where can people find you and your work?
They can look on LinkedIn. They can reach out to me if they have any questions. I make it quite clear I share only with law enforcement.
Yeah. Okay.
I won't share with private entities. I won't share with individuals. It has to be an individual that's with an accredited law enforcement agency. So if they want to reach out, they want to get some information, like what we just, Colton and I just did with the Safer Schools with the AI created images or other unique dynamics, they can reach out to me there.
Great. I'll throw up the links in the episode description when I get this posted. I'll remind everybody just to follow Frank on LinkedIn and reach out if you do have those questions, as he stated. And yeah, follow along, like, share, Quiet Professional, trying to get some information out there and help out law enforcement. And yeah, I want to say thanks for coming on today on the show, Frank. And I'll look to get you on again. So just hang on for 2 seconds.
Certainly. Thank you very much.